Candace's voice rose, sharp and loud enough for the entire cabin to hear. "I am going to ask you one last time. Move to the back of the plane, or I will call security." Her tone dripped with a condescension that was impossible to ignore. Below her, the woman, Naomi, looked up, her expression as calm as a still lake. "I've already told you," she said, her voice even, almost soothing. "I'm not moving." The words were simple, yet they held a strength that was undeniable. Humiliated before a cabin of strangers, Naomi held her ground. But no one, least of all the flight attendant who had judged her so harshly, could have predicted what would happen when the woman they dismissed as powerless revealed who she truly was. The private jet gleamed under the afternoon sun, its sleek design a promise of the luxury within. Inside, the cabin was a study in opulence, plush leather seats, brushed gold accents, and an air of exclusivity that enveloped the passengers. They moved with an easy grace, their expensive luggage rolling silently behind them as they settled into their seats. Some scrolled through their devices, others accepted flutes of champagne from the attentive flight crew, while soft, ambient music played in the background. Among them was Naomi Williams, a woman in her late 30s whose composure was a quiet force. Dressed in a tailored navy blazer and matching slacks, she exuded an understated elegance. As she stepped into the cabin, she moved with a quiet confidence, her gaze sweeping briefly over the other passengers before she made her way to her seat. This wasn't just another trip, it was a journey to oversee a corner of her growing empire, a fact no one on board yet knew. She preferred it that way, for now. Near the entrance stood Lauren Reed, the lead flight attendant. In her early 40s, she carried herself with the crisp precision of someone who thrived on control. Her pristine uniform and perfectly coiffed hair matched a demeanor that judged everything by appearances. Her welcoming smile was warm for some, noticeably cooler for others. As Naomi passed, Lauren's greeting was a curt, "Welcome aboard," the warmth conspicuously absent. Behind Naomi, Mr. and Mrs. Raymond, a couple in their 60s, settled into their seats with the ease of seasoned travelers. Lauren's smile immediately brightened for them. "Good morning, Mr. and Mrs. Raymond. It's lovely to have you with us again." Naomi glanced over her shoulder, noting the stark contrast in Lauren's tone. Her expression remained neutral, but her eyes registered the unspoken dynamics at play. As other passengers settled, Lauren moved through the cabin, offering the Raymonds another bright smile. "Is there anything I can get for you before we take off?" When she passed Naomi, however, her demeanor shifted back to ice. She glanced at Naomi's bag, resting neatly under the seat, and her lips pressed into a thin line. She offered no such courtesy, simply walking by without a word. To Lauren, something about Naomi simply didn't sit right. It wasn't her clothes or her calm self-assurance, but an unshakable feeling that this woman did not belong in this exclusive space. She approached Naomi with quick, purposeful strides, her lips curled into a tight, professional smile. "Excuse me, ma'am," she said, her tone polite but laced with condescension. "I believe you're in the wrong section." Naomi looked up. "I believe this is my seat," she replied, her voice steady. Lauren's smile didn't waver. "I don't think so. This section is reserved for our elite passengers." Nearby, heads began to turn. A socialite leaned forward to get a better view, her curiosity piqued. A businessman across the aisle frowned at Lauren's tone. Naomi's gaze remained steady. "You might want to double-check your passenger list before making assumptions." Lauren's eyebrows arched. "I don't need to check anything," she said sharply. "I know who belongs here." The tension thickened. Whispers rippled through the cabin. "Why doesn't she just move?" one passenger muttered. Lauren crossed her arms, her voice rising again. "If you don't move to the back of the plane, I'll have to call security." "Call whoever you need to," Naomi said, her calm unwavering. "But I'm not moving." Visibly frustrated, Lauren turned to the junior flight attendant, Grace, who stood nearby, watching nervously. "Grace," Lauren snapped, "escort her to the back. Now." Grace hesitated, her eyes darting between the two women. She wanted to suggest checking the list, but Lauren's glare froze her in place. Reluctantly, she nodded. "You might want to think carefully about what you're doing," Naomi said softly, her words carrying a weight that Lauren chose to ignore. "I know exactly what I'm doing," she scoffed. "Now get up." A woman seated ahead of Naomi, the nosy socialite, whispered loudly to her companion. Looks like she's trying to sneak in for a free ride. Lauren seized on the comment, her smirk returning. That's exactly what it looks like, she announced, turning to the other passengers as if to rally support. We have rules for a reason. Naomi didn't respond to the insults. Her composure was a quiet defiance that spoke louder than any argument. As the tension built, the businessman across the aisle leaned forward, offering Naomi a kind smile. Excuse me, he said gently. Is everything all right? I'm fine, thank you, she replied, her voice grateful for the small kindness. Lauren interjected immediately. Sir, I'd appreciate it if you didn't encourage this disturbance. She pointed a finger at Naomi. You're causing a scene. From where I'm sitting, the businessman said calmly, you're the one making the scene. Lauren's face flushed with anger. I've had enough of this, she snapped at Naomi. Either you move or I'll make sure you're escorted off this plane. Naomi met her gaze without flinching. You can try. Frustrated, Lauren finally turned away, moving briskly down the aisle to begin the drink service. She carried a tray of sparkling water, her expression tight with irritation. Minutes later, after serving everyone else, she had still not acknowledged Naomi, who had been waiting patiently. Excuse me, Naomi said, her tone gentle. Could I have some water, please? Lauren paused, glancing at her with a dismissive look. I'll get to you when I can, she said curtly, walking past. A few moments later, Naomi shifted in her seat, stretching one leg slightly into the aisle. Lauren, returning with the tray, saw her chance. Instead of asking Naomi to move, she deliberately altered her path. Her foot struck Naomi's leg, and with a theatrical gasp, she sent the tray of water tumbling into Naomi's lap. Watch where you're putting your legs, Lauren cried. You've made a mess. Naomi looked up from her water-soaked trousers, startled but still composed. But you walked into my leg. I've only asked to be treated with the same respect as everyone else, she continued, her calm gaze unwavering. If that's too much to ask, then maybe you're the one who doesn't belong here. The quiet rebuke hung in the air. Lauren's face flushed with rage. You think you can talk to me like that? She hissed, and then in a shocking loss of control, she raised her hand and slapped Naomi across the face. The sound cracked through the cabin like a thunderclap. Gasps rippled through the passengers. The businessman was halfway out of his seat, his face a mask of disbelief. Grace's hands flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with horror. Naomi slowly straightened, her hands resting calmly in her lap. Her expression was unchanged, but her eyes held a new weight that made Lauren hesitate for the very first time. You just made the worst mistake of your life, Naomi said, her voice quiet, yet it cut through the silence like a knife. Lauren scoffed, trying to recover her bravado. Regret it? What are you going to do, call the police? Naomi didn't answer. Her silence was more powerful than any threat. From the corner of the cabin, Grace slipped away. Pulling out her phone, her fingers trembling, she quickly dialed a number. It's Grace, she whispered. We have a situation on the plane. When she returned, Lauren was still standing over Naomi, her anger simmering. But the power in the cabin had shifted. The passengers were no longer on her side. All you had to do was treat me with respect, Naomi said, her voice firm. But you couldn't, because of your prejudice. Lauren's grip on the empty tray tightened. Respect? People like you don't deserve my respect. You shouldn't have said that, Naomi replied, her voice now sharp. Oh, please, Lauren scoffed. Maybe now you'll understand that actions have consequences. Naomi's eyes narrowed. You're right, she said softly, her words deliberate. Actions do have consequences, and you're about to find out just how true that is. For the first time, a sliver of real doubt pierced Lauren's anger. Something in Naomi's tone sent a chill down her spine. She tried to shake it off, feigning confidence, but a deep unease began to creep in. The horrified looks from the passengers, Grace's pale face, and Naomi's unyielding composure, it all felt like the walls were closing in. Her thoughts raced. What if this woman isn't who I think she is? The way she carried herself with such calm authority, it didn't match Lauren's assumptions. Her stomach twisted as the realization hit her. She had let her prejudice take over, and now she could smell trouble coming. The businessman's glare was a silent indictment, his arms crossed over his chest. Nearby, a nosy socialite whispered to her companion, a disapproving shake of her head punctuating her words. Grace, The younger flight attendant looked as if she wished the floor would swallow her whole, her hands trembling as she clutched the passenger list. Naomi, however, remained a portrait of unreadable calm. She crossed her legs with a slow, deliberate grace, leaning back into her seat. It was a quiet confidence, an unnerving stillness that coiled in Lauren's stomach. Naomi didn't need to raise her voice. She didn't need a grand gesture. Her silence was a promise, one that said everything Lauren refused to hear. The tension in the cabin was a living thing, thickening with every passing second as Lauren tried to regain control. Yet she could not shake the feeling that her actions were a debt, soon to be collected. Naomi's earlier words echoed in her mind. "You're making a mistake." Unbeknownst to Lauren, a message had already been sent. Naomi's quiet response to the slap wasn't submission. It was strategy. Lauren paced near Naomi's seat, her frustration bubbling over. "What do you think you're doing?" she asked, her voice sharp. Naomi, without a word, reached for her phone. Her movements were deliberate as she typed something quickly before setting the device on the armrest. The simple gesture carried an unspoken power. Naomi leaned back slightly, her calm demeanor unwavering. "You'll find out soon enough," she said softly, her words carrying a weight that made Lauren's unease deepen into dread. The cabin fell into a strained silence, broken only by the hum of the engines. The nosy socialite leaned toward her companion. "What's going on?" she whispered. "Do you think she's someone important?" Across the aisle, the businessman sat quietly, a knowing look on his face. He tapped his fingers against the armrest, his gaze fixed on Naomi, as if he had already solved a puzzle no one else could see. Minutes later, the sound of footsteps approached from the front of the cabin. The cockpit door opened, and the pilot stepped out, his face pale, his expression tight. He scanned the room briefly before walking directly toward Lauren, his movements quick and decisive. "What is it now?" Lauren asked, her tone sharp. The pilot stopped in front of her, his posture tense. "You need to step aside," he said, his voice firm but laced with discomfort. Lauren frowned. "Excuse me? I'm handling this." The pilot's gaze flicked to Naomi, then back to Lauren. "I just received a call from management. The owner of the plane is on board," he pointed to Naomi. "And she's Ms. Williams." The words hit the room like a thunderclap. The cabin erupted into gasps and murmurs. The socialite audibly inhaled, her eyes wide. "She owns the plane," she whispered in disbelief. The businessman nodded knowingly, a grim confirmation of what he had suspected all along. Grace, standing near the galley, froze as a wave of relief washed over her. Lauren stared at the pilot, her face turning an alarming shade of red. That can't be true," she stammered, her voice losing its edge. "There must be some mistake." Just then the captain's voice came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we will be making an unscheduled landing. Please remain seated and prepare for descent." The plane touched down smoothly. Moments later, a sleek black SUV pulled up directly to the tarmac. Two sharply dressed assistants stepped out, ascending the plane's steps with quiet authority. "Miss Williams," one of them said warmly, their voice respectful, "everything is ready for your review." Lauren froze, the color draining from her face. "Miss, Williams?" she stammered. The assistants ignored her, their focus entirely on Naomi. "Do you need anything before we proceed?" Naomi stood slowly, her movements graceful. She adjusted her blazer, her calm demeanor radiating power. The passengers watched in stunned silence as she finally spoke, her voice steady and commanding. "I'm Naomi Williams," she began, her gaze sweeping across the cabin. "I am the owner of this plane, and I am also the owner of this airline." Lauren's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. The condescending flight attendant was now a pale shadow of herself, her bravado replaced by sheer panic. Naomi turned her attention to Lauren, her voice calm but sharp as a blade. "Your behavior today has been disgraceful. You've humiliated yourself, mistreated a passenger, and tarnished the reputation of this airline." I didn't know," Lauren stammered. Naomi held up a hand, silencing her. "You didn't know because you didn't bother to treat me with the respect every passenger deserves. You made assumptions, you acted with prejudice, and you escalated a situation that required only basic decency. And now, there are consequences." Lauren's eyes darted around the room, but no one came to her defense. Some passengers had discreetly raised their phones, recording every moment. Lauren, Naomi's voice cut through the silence. Your actions have proven that you are unfit for this position. Effective immediately, you are fired. The words hung in the air like a final verdict. Lauren's face crumpled. Please, Miss Williams, she whispered, her voice breaking. I didn't mean. You didn't mean to get caught, Naomi said coldly. At that moment, 2 uniformed police officers boarded the plane. Lauren's face turned ashen as they approached. Miss Williams, one of the officers said respectfully, we received your report. Are you pressing charges? Naomi's gaze didn't waver. Yes. This individual assaulted me in front of multiple witnesses. I expect her to be held accountable. Wait, this is a misunderstanding, Lauren cried, her voice desperate. One of the officers produced a pair of handcuffs. Ma'am, you're under arrest for assault. As Lauren was cuffed, tears streamed down her face. Please, Miss Williams, I'm sorry, she sobbed. Naomi's expression remained impassive. Your apology means nothing without accountability. You made your choices. Now you face the consequences. As the officers led a defeated Lauren down the aisle, Naomi turned back to the passengers. To everyone here, I apologize for what you had to witness. This is not the standard I expect. Moving forward, we will ensure every passenger is treated with the dignity they deserve. The cabin erupted into applause. Naomi then turned to Grace, the younger flight attendant. Grace, she said, her tone softening, I noticed your professionalism today. You'll be hearing from my office about a promotion. Grace's eyes widened with gratitude. Thank you, Miss Williams. As Naomi stepped off the plane into the fresh air, her assistants briefed her on her next meeting. But her thoughts lingered. Later, in a televised interview that went viral, she was asked what message she hoped to send. Her gaze was steady. Respect is a right, not a privilege, she said, her voice clear and resolute. Everyone deserves to be treated with dignity. True leadership is about setting that standard and ensuring it's upheld. Weeks later, Naomi boarded another flight. The energy was warm, welcoming, professional. Welcome aboard, Miss Williams, the lead attendant greeted her with a genuine smile. It's an honor to have you. As the jet climbed higher into the clouds, Naomi settled into her seat. The window beside her framed a breathtaking view of the horizon. She knew her actions had turned an injustice into a lesson, one that would ripple far beyond that single flight. She smiled to herself, a quiet triumph washing over her. She was shaping a future where respect was the standard, not the exception, and that was a victory no turbulence could ever shake.